Today's episode is inspired by an article on Cinema Blend written by Mick Jost. And, of course, it is on the 6 issues that Star Wars movies need to avoid going forward. Star Wars often does the same stuff with its movies over and over again, and it may be time to shake things up. So let's talk about some of the common tropes that annoy most people in the most recent years and how the franchise could improve significantly if it stopped repeating these mistakes from movie to movie. There's 6 here that I have written down. I could come up with more as we continue to talk, but as of right now, there's 6. And I think the first one is story elements that aren't explained until after the movie. Now, what do I mean by this is, how often do we have to look into a comic or a novel to get further information on a plot hole or a hanging thread? A specific example that comes up time and time again for me is, how the hell did Maz Kanata get Luke's lightsaber? If it's answered in a book or a comic or what have you, I don't know about it because that's not how I wanted to find out. I was kind of hoping that when she said it's a story for another time, that would mean episode 8 or episode 9, we would get those answers. Not only was the character flattened, completely forgotten going forward, but also her importance as a character, as far as bringing in that MacGuffin, or just the nostalgia element of it, I don't know. But that's one thing that I see has happened time and time again in these Star Wars movies, is that we're introduced to things or ideas or concepts or people, and then it's just left hanging. And a lot of the time it's answered in movies. I'm mainly talking about The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker here, because JJ loves to do that. He loves to tease things, make them seem really important, and then never gets around to answering them. Of course, there's examples of this in The Last Jedi as well. Especially the big one, I would think, being Snoke, obviously. But there's so much more that I can't go over all of them as much as I would love to. But I'm sure, what are some of the ones that come to mind for you guys? This is something I think Lucasfilm should keep in mind going forward. The writers should keep in mind going forward. If you introduce something and you highlight it in the story beats, then I think it's worth addressing going forward. And a lot of this has to do with characterization, which I'll get into in another point here later on. The second issue I see is overhyping insignificant characters. This has to do with what I just said. What do Maz Kanata, what does Captain Phasma, and what does Zori Bliss all have in common? They are all characters that were hyped well ahead of their respective movies. I think if you're going to promote characters, you need to promote the characters that are going to be impactful to the story. We could talk about Rose Tico, okay? She was on every single panel for The Rise of Skywalker. She was interviewed more, I think, than Daisy Ridley in some media outlets. They were highlighting her as a leading female in the movie, and they were also highlighting her as the first Asian semi-lead in a Star Wars movie. Which is all great. It's great things to promote, but what was the point of promoting it so hard if she was in the movie for less than 5 minutes, Same thing with Zori Bliss. Zori Bliss was at every single panel that the Rose Tico actress was at. And she was barely in the movie, too. And of course, I realize her importance to the story in that moment. But when you hype her up so much and make her seem like she's going to be a main character, then the magic is gone when it comes on screen. You're let down at the moment that she leaves the movie and never comes back again. And in this case, she does, and she ends up being in the final battle scene for about another minute. And then she nods her head at Poe. And then, of course, shakes her head at Poe. How much cooler do you think Zori Bliss would be if she wasn't promoted for The Rise of Skywalker? Think about it. Think about if we didn't have any leaked photos of her, or they didn't put any posters with her face on it. I mean, she's a really cool design and a really cool outfit. And that's one of the things that made Boba Fett so special and important, is because he wasn't advertised. He wasn't promoted or overhyped before these movies came out. He was just another character. And then the fans then got to see all these neat new things when watching the movie, and it made it just even better. And that's when the urge for more comes. And this is when, going back to the first issue that I have here, is that story elements aren't explained all the way through. And this has to do with hyping up insignificant characters and insignificant things. You know, they hyped up Zori Bliss. So when we see her in the movie, we're disappointed by the fact that she had little screen time and less to say, less to do. But going into it without knowing that she was going to be there and seeing that awesome looking character and see that there was a past relationship with Poe Dameron, oh my God, I want to know more about that. But again, it's how you do it. You can't introduce her as like a very important character with a rich history that has to do with the Skywalker saga. You have to introduce her like a Boba Fett, and you have to introduce her as insignificant to these characters in this story. Everyone can have a tie-in, but it's how you introduce it and how you implement those elements into the overall arcing story. So that's it for the second issue that I think should be focused on going forward. The third one here is that I don't think we should focus on Skywalkers anymore. I think that's one of the big problems that this sequel trilogy had, was that it focused heavily on this whole Skywalker ideology. Not just the bloodline, but also the fact that Rey wanted to adopt the name and commandeer this religion going forward and being a Skywalker and what that means. Yeah, anyone can be a Skywalker. Anyone can change their name, but we're talking about the bloodline here and what a Skywalker means to the world of Star Wars. I'm sorry, but Luke Skywalker doesn't have to do with everything going on in the galaxy. He has nothing to do with Mandalorian. Luke Skywalker has nothing to do with the prequel movies, right? Yet somehow the sequels make it so that everything revolves around Luke Skywalker. Even in the original trilogy, not everything was surrounded in A New Hope. That wasn't about Luke Skywalker. As far as the galaxy's terms were, the galaxy didn't know who Luke Skywalker was. They didn't care. It wasn't a big deal. Their lot in life was just being under the rule of this giant empire. And there was a small band of rebels that were trying to fight against it. But other than that, there wasn't this one prodigy that was to rise up and save the world. It wasn't until Return of the Jedi that people started to hear about Luke Skywalker and get inspired by that message. And then 7, 8, and 9 were all about Luke Skywalker and what his legacy was. So I think we kind of got lost in what Star Wars could be as far as introducing different types of characters. Ones that were outside of what we know. And this ties into the fourth issue, which is Star Wars really needs to get rid of the us versus them plot lines. And what I mean by that is this whole idea of one side trying to take control over a galaxy. That's what the original trilogy was about. Control over the galaxy. The prequels weren't even about that. The prequels were about this small government and a faction of Jedi Knights who were supposed to be peacekeepers that lost control. Yes, the Palpatine was trying to get control over the galaxy, but that's not what the movie was about. It was about this boy and this faction of Jedi that were slowly losing their ability to function by their own dogmatic ways. And then the original trilogy, that is about control over the galaxy. And even more so, it's still just about a family coming together and fighting against something that's not good. So that is, in a way, an us versus them plotline. But the sequel trilogy didn't need to be that again. You know, especially when it's about the same exact villain. So it's just we're repeating the original trilogy over again. A little side note here. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and about how I feel about the sequel trilogy as a whole. And I recently just rewatched the prequel movies, and I watched one with my girlfriend too. We watched Revenge of the Sith together, and Of course, Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones I watched by myself, and I just had so much fun with them, and every time I watch it, I see more details that I just pick up on, that I never noticed before, that I see the vision that George was crafting in his mind and on this medium, and how, it was one guy thought of this epic story, and it just blows my mind that he was able to do it. And there's honestly never been a movie like any of the prequels before. It wasn't even shot like a traditional Hollywood film. Go back and rewatch it. It's honestly really different. It's like if you'd ever seen an episode of Days of Our Lives, which is a soap opera, it's actually very similar to that as far as the way it's composited together. So I find it interesting. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is I think I like the prequels over the sequels. It's crazy to say because The Force Awakens is so, so good. But I think I'm a prequel guy. And you know what? Next week, we're actually going to get into that. I'm going to have an episode titled Prequels versus the Sequels. Self-plug. So come back next week and check it out. And maybe I'll get a guest on. We'll talk about the prequels versus the sequels. So anyway, the us versus them plot lines, they need to skedaddle, right? And what's one thing that Control Over the Galaxy has in common with all of these films? Well, it has to do with our 5th issue, and that is machines that destroy planets. The Death Star. Star Killer Base. In Rise of Skywalker, we had those starships that had the power to destroy planets of their own. The Death Star and Star Killer Base were effective fear-mongering devices for a hot minute, but ultimately not worth the time nor the effort for what they accomplished. I mean, this is especially true when considering how easy both were destroyed, and that the fear that they struck in destroying planets only strengthened rebel factions to band together and stop them. I mean, at that point, it loses intimidation. Don't you agree? If we keep introducing these power killers, these machines that destroy planets, or just big epic bombs or whatever, all it does is make people come together to destroy it, right? So at this point, which is fine, we can have tons of movies about that. I don't care. But when it's one after the other, that's when you got to kind of put a pin in it and say, okay, been there, done that. So I think we need to introduce a new threat. We need a threat. That's the point of a movie. It doesn't have to be a physical threat. Of course, it can be, a mental obstacle. Of course, anything really. But a threat to a central protagonist or an antagonist, a pro-hero, anti-hero, whatever. But we need a different kind of threat at this point. Something that's true, that has a strong ideology, that makes sense, that is completely unbalanced with our lead character, whatever that may be. Speaking of characters, I think Star Wars, at least in recent years, have had a lot of characters in them, don't you think? This kind of has to do with overhyping insignificant characters such as Zori Bliss, Rose Tico, Captain Phasma. But I think our 6th and final issue for what Lucasfilm needs to keep in mind going forward is that we need to stop with ensemble pieces. It's just not fun anymore. It's becoming overkill. There's too much to handle. It's becoming televised. In television, we have tons of characters. Like, you'll get a pilot and you'll have 9 different beginnings of these characters' journeys, and then like 5 episodes later, they're all intertwined, and you'll realize, okay, it was worth my time. But when you have a movie you have a set 3-hour max that you can't go over time on, you lose your characters in it. Star Wars has a tendency to create a bunch of likable characters, but then they struggle to give all of them important roles in the story. The Force Awakens, it gave us an introduction to 3 leads: Rey, Finn, and Poe. And I feel that there's an obligation to give those characters a full-fledged arc and importance. If not in the first movie, at least by the freaking end of the third one. We lost Rey in the sequel trilogy. We lost her as a character. We lost her as a significant importance to the overall saga. And we also lost her as just pure enjoyment or fun to be around. She just slowly got pushed to the back. And it all started at the end of the beginning of The Last Jedi. You know, she went to the island, she found Luke, and then we just hopped onto Luke's back, and it became his story. And yeah, she was involved, and she had, you know, a back and forth with him and Kylo, but we learned nothing new about Rey. And just like in The Empire Strikes Back, just like in Attack of the Clones, the second installment is supposed to be when we really find out who our characters are. This is even something that was promised by Rian Johnson. He said he really wanted to get deep into these characters and figure out what their dark spots were. Do you guys remember that? He said he wanted to really get into what these characters' fears were, and he wanted to rip them apart. I didn't see it. If it was there, I missed it. Maybe someone can enlighten me. But that's what I think is most important. And Rey has to do with almost all of these issues. You know, she was a story element that wasn't explained. And she probably won't be until after the movie. I mean, we didn't even freaking see her with her lightsaber until the last 10 seconds of the movie. Why? What? I mean, even if you're looking at it on the business side of Disney and Lucasfilm, wouldn't you want to sell that lightsaber? That's going to sell a shitload of money. But for some reason, it was put to the very end. Why? So you can leave the book end open for more stories to tell in the future? Daisy Ridley's not going to want to come back to this, at least anytime soon. Hell no, I don't see that happening. She's so done with it. Even at the episode 9 panel, before the movie came out at the Star Wars Celebration last year, she looked so unenthused to be there. Not because she didn't know what to say, but I think because she wasn't feeling it like she used to. During The Force Awakens, before and after, she was extremely giddy and peppy and so much fun. And you could tell she really loved that character and what happened. And then she was kind of silenced after The Last Jedi. And then by the time The Rise of Skywalker came out, she was very bland, even in interviews, which is kind of sad to see. Don't get me wrong, I love Daisy Ridley. She's my favorite part of the sequel trilogy, even with everything I've said, how she's kind of insignificant to the movie at this point. And she's a Skywalker? You can't cover it up with that. You can't say at the end of this saga, at the end of this trilogy, that Rey is a Skywalker and think that that's gonna make up for everything that you left her out of, or everything that you didn't explain to us. It doesn't make it up for us. They threw us these fake parents, right? Which isn't even believable, because Kylo Ren said they were nobodies. Then he comes back a year later and he's like, actually they were Palpatine's kids. Yeah, so you're the granddaughter, right? They give her a lightsaber. I don't know. It's all kind of messed up. So let's review real quick those 6 issues before we get out of here. So number 1, story elements need to be explained during the movie, not after in a comic or a book. Number 2, we gotta stop overhyping insignificant characters. Keep it simple. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. You know, Rey, Poe, Finn. If that's how it was from beginning to end, I think that would have left a lot more excitement and mystery to the other characters that were in the background. And then we wouldn't be disappointed when we find out characters like Captain Phasma were shot off. Twice actually. She was killed off twice. Number 3, no more Skywalkers. As much as I love the lineage, and as much as I would really love to see more, even if it is Rey Skywalker, I would love to see more. But I think for this time period right now, at least for the next 5-10 years, we gotta talk about something else. We gotta move on. Let the past die, right? Kylo, you get me, right? Let the past die. Yeah. Number 4, the us versus them plot line, specifically taking control of the galaxy. Let's get a little bit smaller, right? Don't get bigger. Don't get bigger, Kathleen Kennedy. Don't take control of 2 galaxies now. Huh? A little smaller. Bring it down. Bite size. Arm. Number 5. Planetarily... machines that destroy planets. Planet killers. Star killers. Whatever. Stop it. Death Stars. No. Star destroyers that have planet-destroying guns on it. No. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Give me something else. Give me Machete in space. I bet Danny Trejo would love to come in and whack some people with a machete lightsaber. And finally, number 6, stop with the ensemble pieces, please. Please, if anyone from Disney Lucasfilm is listening, or a future aspiring writer that wants to make a Star Wars movie, please, no more ensemble pieces. Unless it's like, I don't know. What's an ensemble piece? 12 Angry Men. Give me that. Give me that movie. 12 Angry Men in the Star Wars universe. I want 12 angry men, or women, whatever. But I want people in a courtroom, a jury in a Star Wars courtroom talking about Jedi Sith, or the Sith Bane, and how he killed his family, his dad. Give me that story. And they're trying to discuss his fate. Oh my God, it's the prequels all over again. Just politics and space. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, don't let us lose our main character with so many extra ensemble pieces, please.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.